Hi, I'm Josh, and today we're going to show you how to make a campfire for Dungeons & Dragons out of one of these little LED tea lights. So if you play D&D at all, you know sooner or later your players are going to end up standing around some campfire in a dark forest trying to figure out who's taking the first watch and arguing with you on whether or not they can sleep in full plate. And forever, what we've used is this. My buddy showed up with this in some game. I can't remember what. I don't know where it came from. It just kind of showed up one day and we've been using it ever since. But we're going to upgrade today and make a LED fire pit complete with actual LED light. And I've seen where a couple other people have done this with these little LED candles. And when you pop this sucker open, what you find is something like this. If you switch it on, there we go. It gets a nice little flicker effect, and we're going to see what we can do with this. So the first thing I did was cover the whole shebang in modeling clay. Although you could use milliput or green stuff or whatever you have on hand. Modeling clay just happens to be what I had handy. And I made a lot of little divots in there for stones around the outside of the fire, kind of get it, as close to the base as possible. The only problem with this, with this LED candle is the way the switch is set up. The only way to turn this sucker on and off now is to take the battery out, which, yeah, I could live with that, but kind of a pain in the butt. If you can come up with a better way to do it, let me know, and I will definitely apply that to the next one, because I got a couple of these candles laying around. I might make a few of these. Okay, the next thing I've done is just put a ring of rocks around the outside of the light and all the little divots I made. And what I use for rocks is this corkboard stuff. Use it for rocks on all my models. It actually cuts out some nice irregular shapes, and you can chip it and flake it in various ways. But what we're going to have to do next is black coat the whole thing. I'm just going to take it out to the garage and hit it with some black spray paint. Use a little bit of masking tape to cover up the bulb, and we'll be back and we can do some dry brushing on it. Alright, now that we got a nice base coat of black on everything, just going to take some gray paint, kind of dry brush some of these rocks, bring them to life a little bit. Set them real light around the edges, kind of as little paint on the brush as possible, until you get an effect kind of like that. If you overspray and hit some of the black, don't worry, we're going to cover it up with stuff anyway. In fact, that is our next step. But for that, we're going to have to run down, once we finish dry brushing this, we're going to have to run downstairs and grab our hobby sand. Alright, now that we got all of our rocks dry brushed, we're going to take some wood glue, thin it out in a little bit of water over here, off camera. This is what we're going to use to apply our fancy hobby sand. And what we're going to do is just kind of go around the inside of the rocks and in between the rocks. Doesn't matter if you get any on the rocks, it'll actually only make it look cooler. Kind of blend them in a little bit with the environment. Yeah, we're going to use this, put this sand on here to kind of simulate dirt and hot coals, and we'll dry brush it different colors and see if we can get it to have a nice hot coals effect. If we dry brush it green, or orange rather. Green fire, that sounds stupid. Alright. And I always leave a little rim on kind of the outside of the miniature to, something to pick it up by. So that way you're not disturbing your fancy schmancy paint and basing job every time you pick this sucker up. Alright, so we're going to dump some hobby sand on here. On top of a paper, of course, so we can not waste it. Tap it all off. Alright, we're going to clean off our rocks a little bit here. And that is going to be our dirt and our hot coals. Got a couple little touch-ups to do, but you get the idea. Now once you got your sand on the model, I like to go over it again with just a super thin level of, just a super thin layer of wood glue and water, just to kind of seal it all in place. Not even disturbing any of it. If you're moving sand, you're using too much, or you're pushing too hard. But we're going to have to get some more wood glue on our palette, but you get the idea. We're kind of just putting another layer on top of the layer that we used to anchor it to kind of seal it in place on top and then tie it all together. Easy stuff. Now, while we're waiting on our sand and our wood glue to dry on the fire pit itself, we're going to work on our firewood. What I'm using for firewood is just clipped off pieces of like plastic Games Workshop sprue. Just cut them into little squares, and I'm shaving down the edges of them to make them kind of irregular, because you don't want them looking too uniform. Just get a hobby knife, get on there and mess up any like really straight edges. Don't make it look like a piece of sprue you just threw on there, you know, make it look like a hewn piece of wood. And you could use about anything for this. You could just take an old bamboo chopstick and chop it up after, you know, you got with Chinese takeout. You know, the simplest way to get logs for this thing might be just be to go out in the yard and get some twigs. You know, chop them up with your hobby knife, throw the appropriate level of paint on them to make them all uniform, and there you go. But yeah, I'm going to use plastic sprues because that gives me a little more control over it. Try to do this with twigs, and you know, there's soft wood at the center of them and everything else. So if you know, you might want to split them if you're doing that, and just use like sections of them, which would actually make it look like firewood. So that might be kind of cool. So yeah, we're just going to take pieces of sprue and mess them up like that till they look like rough hewn wood. Now that we got all these messed up sprues that we're going to use for firewood, we're going to just go through and kind of do this all at once. Line them all up. I'm going to paint, I'm going to lay them all down here like this and paint one side of the firewood black and paint one side brown. I figure the side that's facing the fire will be black and the outside will be brown. And we'll add some little, you know, effects and such like that. We're going to put some hot coal marks and all that good stuff on there. But yeah, pretty simple stuff. We're just going to go through and make half of it black and half of it brown here for base coating. Easy stuff. So now that we got our rough hewn wood kind of brown on one side, black on the other, we're going to do a different effect on each side. We're going to heavily shade the brown side with Nuln Oil to kind of fill in all the cracks and make it look groovy. And what this will do is just kind of bring out all the little rough hewn marks we did whenever we painted it brown. It'll sit in all the creases and crevices. This stuff is pretty much talent in a bottle. It'll make a good painter out of anybody. So that's what we're going to do to the brown side. Kind of make it look oily and bring out all the texture in it. And since we've already got our Nuln Oil out here, let's go ahead and hit the inside of the fire pit with some here. Kind of fill in that sand. I want to kind of keep it inside the rocks though, because this is going to be our ash and our hot coals and such. Pretty easy stuff. You can push it around kind of wherever you want it to go. Might not hurt to put some in between the rocks actually. I like how it pools in there. Yes, Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade. Two of the greatest things ever invented. But yeah, we'll let that dry and that'll give us a nice base for where we make that into hot coals and ash. Now, for the black side of our firewood, we're going to use good old Citadel Blazing Orange, because I can't think of a better color to use for fire. And on the dark sides of the firewood, we're just going to go through, take our spotter brush here, make a lot of little like hot coal marks. But this is going to take quite a while. Try not to cross them up there, but You get the idea. We're going to kind of go for a hot coal effect on part of the burnt wood. But that's going to take a little bit to do, so I'll be back in a few. Alright, so here's our hot coal effect we've done on all the parts of the wood that are going to face towards the inside of the fire. And while we got our blazing orange out here, let's go ahead and do a little dry brushing on the fire pit. Kind of right there around the center of the fire where it's going to be hottest. Maybe used a little too much paint there. I may go through and hit this with Nuln oil again just to kind of mute it out. I feel like this may be too bright. And what I may do after this is go around the outside of the fire pit, dry brush with just some white or gray to kind of get that layer of white ash you get on the outside of a fire pit after it's burned for a while. I almost feel like it should be brighter. Maybe we should actually go thicker. Let's go thicker towards the middle. And then we'll kind of just dry brush out from it. There we go, that works. That's the shit right there. Alright, let's do some ash. And around the outside of the pit, just going to do a little bit of white dry brushing. I think we may have used too much, but get some ash going on here. There we go. I may hit this with just the Nuln oil again to kind of go in through all the little cracks in the sand and make it all pop. Now the hardest part of this so far has just been getting this damn wood on here. I had to use an unexcusable amount of super glue to get this to kind of sit right and look right. I had to trim all my sprues, but you know, that's the game. But what I am going to have to do is wait for all that globby super glue to dry and go in and touch everything up and do a little work on it before I add some final touches. Alright, after globbing tons of super glue on this thing to get it to stick and look right, went through and touched everything up and gave it a big old wash in Nuln oil to kind of cover up all the super glue stuff. You can still see a little of it right there. But we're going to fix that. We're going to go through and I'm going to add some highlights and maybe dry brush inside with a little bit of orange, maybe some white on the outside to give it that ash effect. We'll be right back after we do that. Alright, so dry brushing orange around where the in between the logs and kind of up in between where they meet and everything gave it a real good effect. I think it'll look really good once we turn the light on. But I'm going to go through and do the same thing around kind of the just the base with white to kind of give it that ash outlay. So get our white here. Don't need a lot, just a little bit for dry brushing. I think we might do this in between logs too to kind of give it that little ash edge effect. This stuff is really gloppy. It's not the best for dry brushing. But I do like the kind of effect it gives it though. A little ash around the outside kind of shows you where the fire begins. Yeah, just a little layer of ash around the bottom there. Maybe some in between. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. But it still looks a little bare. What I might do with this is get the old wood glue out and put some static grass on it just to kind of finish it off. Okay, so I'm going to go kind of sparingly with the static grass. We're just going to use it to kind of dress it up a little bit. Maybe put a little here, a little there. Kind of fill in the spots in between the rocks, you know what I mean? This big flat area here that doesn't have anything going on with it. It could use some. That'll kind of bring it to life and Make it look a little more dynamic. Not a whole lot. We're just using it to dress it up. Don't want any inside there where it would get burnt up by the fire. Alright, once you got your glue in place, just take your static grass. Oh, this is the new stuff that needs to be broken up. Kind of stick it all in there. When you're done, just kind of tap it out. We'll have to wait for that to dry and clean it up for a little bit. But yeah, I think that's going to look pretty cool. Alright, now that our static grass is dried, the only thing really left to do on this sucker is to hit it with our trusty Tester's Dull Coat, which I hit all my minis with because it kind of seals up your paint job and makes it last a little bit longer and gives everything kind of a uniform matte finish. So we're going to hit that with the testers out in the garage and then throw the battery back in this sucker and make sure it still works. That'd be a hell of a thing if we did all that just to have it not work. We screwed it up or something. We'll see. Alright, here she is, our finished product. This actually turned out really nice, man. I might make a couple of these just to experiment with different stuff. But yeah, pretty easy to do and came out really well, actually. I dig it. Alas, my companions, our fire doth burn low. Throw another gnome on it, that it may burn throughout the night. Yes, wonderful. Surely this will keep away the bugbear and her lawful evil attorney, who insist that I owe them child support.